Once again, you are now listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. On today's program, I want to look at something that's going to affect each and every one of us, whether that impact is individual or directly towards us, or the people around us are going to be deeply impacted by what I'm going to be talking about on today's Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm talking about what you've heard about, what you've probably thought about, and that is the AI takeover, or the artificial intelligence takeover of the job market, which basically means, in a more simplistic form, millions and millions of jobs are about to be lost on an incremental but steady level. Millions of jobs are going to be lost in all kinds of sectors as machines, as robots, as AI-driven technologies replace many, many levels of employment sectors in our society. So we're not going to leave you in a place of despair and doom and gloom. We're going to offer you a tangible way in which you can overcome that problem. But first and foremost, in the overcoming of the problem, you need to recognize what the problem is, how fast it's coming towards you, and what you can do about it as an individual. I don't believe for a moment, because I'm a Christian, I don't apologize about that. And I didn't just become a Christian publicly when it became trendy. You've noticed that everybody and their brother in the many sectors of social media and alternative media are now openly professing Christians that love to wear crosses or crucifixes. They love to say they're Christians. They have pictures of Jesus on their set and so on and so forth. And I'm not knocking any of it, because guess what? I'm not their judge. And that's something I always need to remind myself of, that I'm not their judge. So if indeed they have had some kind of conversion to Christ during the last, 7 years, because all of this happened due to the impact of various sociological forms of destruction that hit our society in the last 7 years. All the adversities that hit our society in the last 7 years created a psychological pressure, a spiritual pressure, and a basic bottom line survival fear pressure on millions of people. And as a consequence, many, many millions of people returned to Christ, or now seeking Christ. So if I make a passing remark about that, again, as we speak of various individuals who claim to be Christians who were simply not Christians a short number of years ago, 7 years ago, I'm not supposed to be judging any one of them. I think, of course, it's best that their conversion experience be genuine and real. But the impact of their so-called conversion, and I hope again it's legitimate, the impact of all these conversions is a very, very good thing for our society, an extremely good thing. So once again, I don't judge anybody, because, God works in mysterious ways, and people will surprise you. So I will give people the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, I use my critical thinking abilities, as you do also. Okay, so what's coming our way? Notice the fact that even though this is the biggest story, this is perhaps one of the most important stories that has ever been announced and reported. I mean, there's nothing bigger than this story. There are other big stories that are very, very important. But in terms of its potential to impact or even destroy entire population groups, this story is unparalleled by anything else. So, given that fact, and it is a fact, how is it that proportionally, how is it on a percentage basis that really such little coverage is given to this story? And the story, again, in a nutshell, is AI is going to replace millions and millions of jobs. AI is going to make millions and millions of jobs obsolete here in America and around the world. And this is going to have an astronomical impact on every sector of our society. I remember talking about this 10 or 15 years ago when it was just starting to bubble towards the surface. And what I discovered was, and this was 10 or 15 years ago, that, for example, a lot of neighborhoods or towns across America, they have their own, small town papers. It could be, for example, a real estate subdivision neighborhood. It could be a rural neighborhood. It could be a rural town. But all these geographic towns, so to speak, or locations, many of them have a regular publication that they print or publish, and they distribute to the townspeople or the people that live in that geographic area. Now, most of these papers or publications are named after the town, and they represent the advertisers are all local. The advertisers want to get in that paper. They want to spend advertising dollars because it's a way to reach people who are very much interested, not in national news, but people that are interested in local news, their particular neighborhood. So I remember reading in this article that the area around the Rose Bowl, where they have the big sports games, and even I think there was a Billy Graham crusade at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. That area of the Rose Bowl in Pasadena has a local paper that is published exclusively for the relatively small community around the neighborhood of the Rose Bowl, where they have the great stadium. So you would think, I mean, your natural instinct is to think that, well, this has to be the editor, the writers, the reporters, the photographer, the owners of that local Rose Bowl neighborhood in Pasadena, California. Well, of course, they would have to be located, they would have to live in, they'd have to have their offices in that exact geographic location. Because after all, how could they do stories? How could they do news reporting with a local emphasis if they themselves were not local? And then as I continued to read on in this article, it mentioned the fact, and this blew my mind, it mentioned the fact that this local Rose Bowl newspaper publication, and these things usually come out once a week, once a month, twice a month, or even more. But the thing that stunned me was what the article disclosed was the local Rose Bowl neighborhood paper, which featured photographs of people that were local, stories that were local, et cetera, was written, published, photographed, and everything else, not even near the Rose Bowl, not even in the state of California, not even in the United States, but this local Rose Bowl magazine publication was actually published, produced, written, the reporters and everything else in a foreign nation, an Asian nation, and I don't remember the nation. It was either I think it was in one of the free nations of China. So it was published, in the Pacific. It was published in China. And so the way that they were able to produce a local newspaper with local stories about local people and local interests was that they were using AI, artificial intelligence. They were heavily using the internet, and they were compiling all this research which is available, data which is available from all kinds of secondary and third sources, like who's marrying who or who's deceased. There's all these secondary ways of getting information. And then they were connecting it, compiling it, assembling it by looking at all these reports and data that most people don't look at. And because they had the speed enhancement of AI, they were able to produce a local Rose Bowl newspaper publication, but they were able to produce it from China, from one of the Chinese nations. And then this article went on to say that there are thousands, tens of thousands, and I'm sure more than that. So let's just say there are tens and thousands of local publications being published in the United States, in especially scenic type of areas like the Rose Bowl, places in Montana, places in Hawaii, you could go Yellowstone, you could go on and on forever. And all these local publications and local papers are not managed, produced, edited, reported, written. They're completely produced separately. They have no direct connection to the United States of America. And yet, when you read these papers, you would swear that they were written by local reporters who visited local business owners, local families. They covered local news of importance. And you would have been absolutely convinced that this was totally a legitimate local publication. And the same is true for all these other countless thousands of local publications that would print local stories about local businesses and local people and all kinds of local interest stories. But once again, it wasn't even partially made in the United States of America. It was made in some far-off place like the Philippines or India or China. And so what does this say? It says that all the Americans who formerly had jobs as reporters, photographers, advertising salesmen, magazine production people, printers, etc., all of these categories of employment it was no longer American people living in America or American people living in these particular locations who were producing these local publications. All of these local publications, by the thousands and thousands across the United States, are via AI, via technology, via research on the internet, producing publications that are being actually produced and managed and run from, far-off nations like China. And that means there are millions and millions of local jobs being lost to AI, to foreign publishers. And this moves not only in the local newspaper publication business, but there's many, many areas of business which are now being replaced by AI, or they have been shipped overseas. And nobody knows it because they're so well done. Nobody questions for even a moment whether or not they were written, produced, and had stories created by reporters living in that particular American location. So things are changing faster than you think. And then the other thing that this article said, and again, this is 10 or 15 years ago, it said that so many jobs that you would think could never be replaced by AI or robots or things of that technological level, that many of these jobs would be among the first to be lost. In other words, we're not speaking about, the widespread loss of people who are grape pickers or orange pickers or harvesting vegetables in the middle of the state of California, which was until recently one of the most fertile growing places in the world. We're not talking about the widespread and pervasive loss of the lower tier jobs. We're talking about the loss of lower tier jobs, middle tier jobs, and what would be considered the higher level jobs. So what this article pointed out was people who had jobs like plastic surgeons, media personalities, or television personalities who would appear on a local television network and deliver the news or give an analysis of the weather. Very somewhat sophisticated jobs that you would never in a million years dare to dream that these jobs were vulnerable to replacement by AI and robots. Well, they are. And this is happening. And factory assembly workers on an assembly line and all kinds of things. So we have just entered the very beginning of this. Well, it's nothing less than a quantum AI revolution that's going to affect every part of our society. So what happens next? What happens in the next 5 years? What happens in the next 10 years? Well, in the next 10 years, analysts, and some of these analysts, by the way, are AI analysts, they are reporting that AI, artificial intelligence, could end up displacing a massive number of jobs just in the next decade or the next 10 years. And the estimates of how many jobs will be lost range from 75 to 800 million jobs lost globally. 75 to 800 million jobs are going to be lost globally. People are going to be unemployed and replaced by robots and AI. Now, the computation of these numbers is based on a variety of factors, measurement factors, which would include the acceleration or speed of AI and how quickly it is adopted by various sectors in society, and then the identification of the types of jobs that will be most susceptible to AI automation. And also, what is critical to look at is that AI is also expected, and this is something that's surprising to most people, but it is expected that AI is going to create entirely new jobs in industries, making the overall impact by AI on various sectors in employment even more complex. So let's look at some other numbers here. The number of jobs that could be lost, and again, we're talking about the elimination of millions and millions of jobs across a wide spectrum of different industries. So we could talk about the manufacturing sector alone. And we all have mental pictures in our minds of these giant assembly lines that were once in Detroit when they used to build automobiles in Detroit, and you'd see the interior shots of a factory for cars with an assembly line, which might have been years ago basically human workers on the assembly line. And then as time went on, it was a mixture of human workers and AI or robotic workers. So that's an example of what's going to happen. So in the automobile manufacturing sector alone, and manufacturing itself as an individual sector, you can see up to 20 million jobs lost. And you have think tanks that are projecting disturbing facts like this, and that is automation or robot jobs or AI jobs or machine jobs or whatever you want to call them could easily displace or unemploy between 400 and 800 million jobs globally by 2030. So 2030, by the way, just happens to be the due date for the ominous Great Reset. Remember, the Great Reset is supposed to be, according to the Great Reset people, according to the World Economic Forum, according to the UN, the due date for the arrival and basic completion of the Great Reset is supposed to happen by 2030. So it's not an accident that the estimates of somewhere between 400 and 800 million jobs lost globally will occur by 2030. Now, why? How can I say that? I can say that because the heads of the Great Reset, people like the former head of the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, made that infamous remark that makes you want to barf instantly, where he said to Americans and people all over the world, as an arrogant, self-appointed elite that he is, he said these words which are nothing more than a lie. And he said the famous words which I've quoted often to you: you will own absolutely nothing, but you will never be happier in your whole life. Now that is a lie. That has never happened in human history. In fact, the opposite of that has happened in human history. That's the exact same lie, word by word, that was given to the that was given to the Russian people by the communist revolutionaries when they were trying to sell communism to the masses in Russia. Those were the words used by the Chinese communist revolutionaries when they were trying to seduce the common citizens into going along and becoming communists. They were promised that communism was going to usher in a kind of heaven on earth. Well, have you seen anywhere at any time any remote evidence that communism has ever in its existence, from when it was first created by Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto? Have you seen any evidence whatsoever of communism producing a heaven on earth utopian state? Well, of course you haven't. It always produces the opposite. Far from producing heaven on earth, the Great Reset, communism, socialism, globalism, what it will produce is not heaven on earth. It will produce hell on earth. And you will own absolutely nothing because you'll be below dirt poor. And it's a total lie to say you'll never be happier in your whole life. Because if you dare to express your unhappiness, if you dare to complain about the Great Reset system, most likely you will be sent to a re-education camp, or you will be shot to death and killed, which was exactly what happened to anybody who dissented from the communist, socialist, Marxist revolutions. So this is not paradise on earth, and you will be not happier than you've ever been in your whole life. That's a total lie. You'll be miserable beyond your ability to conceive. So the job categories, of course, that are the easiest to displace with AI and robots and machines and computers are these types of jobs. Any job which is repetitive and hires employees to perform routine tasks, those kinds of jobs, because they're, just any job that's repetitive and where you're performing routine tasks, it's easy to conceive that your job could easily be replaced by some kind of AI robot. So the repetitive and routine task type of job is going to be the most vulnerable to the automation revolution. And this includes jobs like, so if you're in any kind of job like the ones I've just been mentioning, if you're in any kind of job category like the ones I've just been mentioning, you are a target and you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable to automation. You're vulnerable to any job which your basic role is to function in the area of like data entry clerks, telemarketers. When I get bombarded with a minimum of 20 to 25 robocalls per day. So I just basically don't answer my phone. And you say, well, why? Because I can't function. The jobs that I have to perform require intense, uninterrupted concentration camp. That's a Freudian slip. The jobs that I have to do require intense concentration, not concentration camp. That was like a Freudian slip. So I have to focus. I have to be immersed in my subject matter. I can't be diverted every 5 to 10 minutes by some fool calling me, and then when you get rid of them, they call back and they're constantly switching their origination phone number. That's done by AI and computers. Now, also, as you're being bombarded with machines calling you, you're also being bombarded from people who work all over the world, and America too. You're being bombarded by calls from telemarketers, where it's human beings calling you like a robot. Well, if you're a telemarketer, they can replace that job so easily. I have been called a number of times recently by so-called human telemarketers. Usually, they're human almost instantly. Okay, but the acceleration, the growth, the evolution of the skills and abilities of a robotic AI-driven telemarketer, where you're no longer talking to a human being, you're now talking to a AI program machine that has been programmed with such sophistication that it knows how to mimic, it knows how to imitate very cleverly. It comes off like it's a human being. Okay, so a number of weeks ago, one of these robotic AI telemarketers called me, and we were in the first opening line that the so-called female voice made. It caught me off guard because I thought it was a human being, but yet part of me couldn't help but noticing an unexplainable oddity in the tone of her voice. And so by the time we were into the second and third sentence, in fact, in time we were into the second sentence, as this so-called female human being was responding to my questions, there was it was an almost unnoticeable oddity in her voice. And then I realized in like the second sentence that she made towards me was, I'm not talking to a human female telemarketer. I'm talking to a robotic AI telemarketer. And the reason I was able to figure that out was the responses to what I said to the telemarketer didn't elicit a normal human response. It very much sounded like a carbon copy. Well, people don't even know what that means anymore, so I'll use a different expression. The telemarketer sounded like an exact duplicate of a human being telemarketer, but there were slightly odd deviations in her voice pattern, and the way she would the words she would use to answer my questions were non-typical. Okay. And so I had an epiphany, one of those aha moments, because I realized that by the time she was making her second sentence in response to my question, the almost microscopic oddity in her voice was a giveaway or a tell to me that she was not really a human she, but she was an AI programmed, robotically programmed telemarketer, but not your lower level telemarketer that's AI driven or robotically driven, in which they actually, sometimes you get a call by a telemarketer and there's no question in the world, 100% for sure in the first sentence that you're not talking to a human being. You're talking to a robot. You're talking to a machine, because the programs and the way this machine speaks is so simplistic and so robotic and so automated that you'd have to be an idiot to believe you were talking to a human being. And that's the technology that's been mainstream for a long time. Now, I believe that across the nation and across the world, in the last number of months alone, there's been let's just call it an evolutionary jump in the sophistication, the verbal tones, the AI programming, the robotic programming of these so-called female or male telemarketers. And so these things are so sophisticated that initially, if you're not hyper vigilant, initially they may fool you into thinking that you're really talking to a human being. But if you're using what I call enhanced perception, that so-called human telemarketer will reveal to you very quickly, if you're paying attention, by the slight oddities, the slight discrepancies in the voice, the choice of words that she or he uses, and the type of answers that he or she gives to your questions. So right now, even as we're talking, AI is evolving faster and faster. And so we're just in the primary primitive stages of AI telemarketers. Give it another year or two, it will keep taking incrementally upward leaps in progress and sophistication. It's not going to be fixed at any particular level. It will always be evolving, always be growing. So the day is coming soon. You could talk about 3 years or 2 years when the telemarketers, the female telemarketers, the male telemarketers that you're talking to, are now so sophisticated in their AI programming, so sophisticated in their robotic computer programming, that they will actually have the ability, unless you're very perceptive, they'll actually have the ability to fool you. And you will think through the majority of your conversation that you're talking to a real human being. And in fact, the level of programming is now so sophisticated with AI-trained, AI-driven telemarketers. The level of sophistication in the programming is at such a high level that when you're contrasting and comparing the difference between an AI, robotic, machine-programmed, so-called human telemarketer, but in reality it's an AI telemarketer, and you're comparing the AI telemarketer with with an actual human being telemarketer, in many cases, if not most cases, I would suspect that the AI computer-trained telemarketer will perform better, will be more patient, more caring, more kind, answer deeper questions, be willing to answer more questions, will never exhibit a kind of negativity towards you, never exhibit a kind of, you're wasting my time attitude towards you. They'll never communicate to you a kind of, I'm getting impatient now. You're asking me the same questions over and over, or you're asking me to keep qualifying and answering and explaining my questions, and I am running out of patience. Well, that's the normal response that is to be expected, unfortunately, from human female or human being male telemarketers. They lose their patience. So if you contrast that behavior with the infinitely patient, kind, and too perfect to be true, if you want to know the truth, human AI program telemarketer, and you compare it and contrast it with a human being telemarketer, I would say that in the next 2 years or earlier, the human being telemarketer will rate consistently inferior in all ways in comparison to the consistently superior AI program telemarketers. Now, I don't want that to happen, but it's going to happen because you see, human beings get tired because they have jobs, they have responsibility, they have families, they're raising children, they have financial pressures, they have all kinds of pressures and fears and anxieties because they're human. And so what happens is that even though the human being will have the intention of giving you good service because they know that they're going to be surveyed, the human being program telemarketer may have every intention of doing an outstanding job, but because they're an authentic human being, they're susceptible to the temptations and imperfections that go along with being a real human being. Again, there's all these outside factors that robot AI telemarketers are immune from. Remember, a computer, a bot, an AI program telemarketer doesn't run out of energy, doesn't get tired, doesn't have a headache, isn't battling off depression, isn't thinking about some big life problem in their lives. See, when you're an authentic human being, you're human. And that's what makes a human being a human. But the machine will always beat the human being in most cases, at least in the category of telemarketer or similar jobs. And so no human being is going to be able, when it comes to these routine, repetitive, often monotonous kind of jobs, the robot AI machine-driven telemarketer will always outperform a human being-driven telemarketer. And you know, that's sad, but that's the way it is. So if you're a businessman that has no concern about having the American people employed, you have no concern for the safety and prosperity of the American people, and we have many businessmen, many corporate heads today who I believe function as if they were soulless. And I've observed this over a lifetime because I've worked in all kinds of different corporations, all kinds of jobs. And that exposure to so many different job sectors, both high and low, the many numerous jobs I've had in all kinds of industries and corporations, etc., has given me a vast overview of the big picture. And what I observed early on was, and this is before AI and this is before robotics and stuff like that. What I observed early on was that the heads, the CEOs, the vice presidents, the guys on the top of the pyramid in any given industry, they would, in their lust for money and it's some, part of it's a legitimate and authentic desire to keep your job. These CEOs at the top, in some respects, are just as much slaves as the people in the lowest positions in their corporation, because the CEOs and the top tier of management and giant corporations, they have to answer to a totally impersonal stockholders and the stock market. And they have to produce quarterly statements and other statements that show profitability. And not only do they have to show on paper profitability, they have to show precise future numerical proven expectations of future financial growth by that corporation and future profitability and longevity for that corporation. And if they aren't producing those things, the stockholders get nervous, and then the value of the stock of any particular corporation starts to do a nosedive. It starts to tank. And then guess what happens? That CEO, that higher level tier of upper management, their jobs are at risk. And if the stocks are not performing and people aren't buying the stocks and profitability is not being generated, they are among the first to go. Now, they have golden parachutes often. And by golden parachutes, I mean these unemployment packages that are like the gift of kings. They have these lucrative, super wealthy, totally unsubstantiated retirement or unemployment packages, so that if they quit or they get fired or whatever, if they get asked to step down, they are guaranteed an enormous financial payout to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, medical benefits of the highest level, all these additional financial incentives, financial packages that go far beyond merely the massive pool of wealth they're going to get, but they're going to get a piece of the action in the future. And the point is that even if they are fired or let go, the CEOs, the CFOs, et cetera, even if they're fired or even if they're let go for not generating profits, for poor management, it's like they're immune from the ramifications of their poor management, because they're sent off with this incredibly lucrative package of wealth. And the point is that they are also the first people to be fired when people are looking for a scapegoat, and they need to keep those stocks, keep the value of the stocks have to constantly rise. So that is a very agonizing part of our financial system, because ultimately the person that gets penalized are the people in the lower levels of any given corporation that are performing some of the jobs that don't pay that well to begin with, and their payouts are like non-existent. Essentially, they get ripped off as they get booted out the door. Okay, you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm Paul McGUIRE. Be sure right now to visit paulmcguire.us and check out our links, check out our specials, and you can do that at paulmcguire.us. This is Paul McGUIRE. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm giving you the information that you're getting today to give you a heads up about what's going to happen, what is happening in our society, so that you can be proactive, so that you don't have to be a victim of a world financial system. Now, once again, the people who are in the most vulnerable positions, and there are many areas of employment that would be considered vulnerable, but just right out of the gate, there are certain categories of jobs and employment which are the most vulnerable to AI taking over your job. And that would be any job that you perform that consists basically of things like repetitive and routine tasks. You're going to be vulnerable to AI takeover, automation takeover, robotic takeover. And these jobs that are vulnerable include job roles like data entry clerks, telemarketers, cashiers, and customer service representatives. Now, you've all dealt with customer service representatives. It's a nightmare. You get put on hold. You get hung up on. And don't think for a minute. Let me share with you something that has just bothered me my entire lifetime. And I don't know why it bothers other people. It doesn't bother other people, but it's always bothered me. And maybe because I see it for what it is. Every time you call a help desk, every time you call a corporation or a national business or whatever, and you always have to call somebody because you're deluged with paperwork, every time you have to deal with a help desk of any kind, okay, what happens is that you get hung up on, you get put on hold, you get the same proverbial insulting automated response that goes something like this. And every one of you have heard what I'm about to do, a half-baked acting job. I'm trying to imitate your typical help desk recording. There'll be some kind of beep or sound, some kind of melodious music, maybe, if, to calm you down, because you're going to be uptight. And you'll hear some kind of trivial stupidity like, "We are sorry. At this particular moment, we are experiencing an unexpected rate of phone calls. Please call us back, in 30 minutes, or please call us back at a later time. We value your business." Now, of course, they don't value your business, because if they even remotely valued your business, they wouldn't put you through hell every time you called their help desk. That's for starters. Number two is, how is it that all these major corporations, the big ones, the big major corporations, they use the same computer stuff, the same mentality from corporation to corporation? They always use the same excuse. We're experiencing an unexpected level of phone calls, right now. Please call us back at a later time, or, you can leave your phone number and somebody will get back to you. Blah, 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 blah. It's all insulting. It's all insulting because you know and I know that the reason they're experiencing an unprecedented level of phone calls is because they never hired the appropriate number of employees to answer the phone and to handle the phone calls in the first place. So that answer that they initially giving you, where they pretend to be surprised by we are experiencing an unexpected level of phone calls. That's a lie. Unexpected level of phone calls. Every time I call your corporation, I hear the same recording. So what you're telling me, assuming your help desk is open 24/7, what you're telling me is that 24/7, every time I call your corporation, you're experiencing an unexpected level of phone calls, and that you're sorry. Well, how could that be? Because any business worth its salt and doing an analysis of its own business practices would realize that if you were constantly experiencing this higher level of phone calls, which is prohibiting you from answering the phone and talking to your real customers like you and like me, the reason they can't come to the phone, they're saying, is we're experiencing an unexpected level of phone calls right now. Well, any business would be constantly evaluating where it's making money, where it's losing money. So in any kind of inventory being conducted by any corporation, they would, within weeks, determine that, hey, let's just hypothetically say, on a daily basis, it's a big national corporation. So on a daily basis, we receive an average of 4,000 phone calls. But we only hired a phone call answering staff or a help desk of, let's say, hypothetically, 200 people. Now, three months have gone by, and they've done a lot of advertising, and they've come out with a lot of new products. So their business has grown. It's expanded. So now they're not getting, an average of 4,000 calls a day. They're now getting double that. They're getting 8,000 phone calls a day. But they're still operating and running their business as if they were receiving a far smaller number of phone calls today. That means they've hired only enough employees. Initially, they hired 200 employees to answer their phones and answer the help desk phone calls. They just have 200 employees. But their business has grown because they've allocated money. They've spent funds on advertising and the development of new products. So the number of phone calls they're getting to the help desk and questions and things like that, they still have the same 200 people answering for all these calls coming in. And now it's not 2,000 calls per day. It jumps up to, 4,000 calls per day. And then because they're spending so much money on advertising and the releasing of new products, the amount of calls to the help desk and to the corporation has now skyrocketed to 8,000 calls per day. But they want to make as much money as they can because they're all about money. You know that, and I know that. They're not about customer service, except in terms of customer service lip service. So what happens is they're still relying on just 200 employees who were originally hired to answer the phone calls of approximately 2,000 people. but now they're getting 8,000 phone calls and they've only got 200 employees. Why have they not incrementally increased the number of employees as the number of phone calls keeps growing bigger and bigger? Well, the reason is obvious. If they don't hire new employees, they can save a lot of money in terms of personnel being hired to answer the phones. So they can save a ton of money. And when they save a ton of money, they can increase their profits big time. And what does that do? They increase their profits, which has the other effect of vastly increasing the value of their stocks. So they increase their profits and they increase the value of their stocks enormously. And this makes the CFO and the CEO and the top tier of management look like heroes, and they get big job offers, and they get sweetener packages of more benefits, more salary, more perks. But meanwhile, what they've really done is they've exploited the situation. So when you hear the recording saying, we apologize that we can't come to the phone right now because we're expecting we're receiving an unusual number of phone calls. Please call back, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what that's code for is this. Whenever a major corporation tells you they're getting too many phone calls and nobody can answer the phone right now, you need to interpret that as code for the following. What that really means is, we don't value you. We don't value your time. We'll make you sit on the phone and listen to lame music, or we'll tell you to call back when it's less busy. That way we can keep our hiring costs down. And since we don't value you, and because we don't respect you at all, because we wouldn't do this if we really did respect you, we only value you to the extent that we can use you and exploit you to increase our profits. So what we really mean by these recorded statements is this. We know the longer we have you wait to get through to our help desk, the more profit we're going to make. Because, yeah, it's true, time is money. But that works both ways. You, the consumer, me, the consumer, our time is worth money. The corporations don't value that. They only value their time being worth money. So they've made the top-down decision that they're going to make you wait to get through to a help desk. And the longer you wait and are willing to wait without complaining, without really, raising a ruckus, the longer you wait, the more profit they can make. Because if they can get away by making you wait, and if they can get away from having to hire new employees to answer the phone to man the help desk, that's your time they're wasting. So by making you waste your precious time waiting for somebody to come on the line for the help desk, or waiting for somebody to come online from the corporation to answer the phone, every minute that they're wasting of your time as you sit there twiddling your thumbs waiting for somebody to come on the phone, that's their way of making money, and more money. Profit, and more profit. See, the whole thing is a scheme. It's a hustle, and they know it. And so if you sit there and actually, I don't know who would possibly believe their lie that, that they're receiving an unexpected number and high level of phone calls. I don't know who would possibly believe that. But they're expecting that a significant number of people will believe that. And as such, as long as you believe that, and as long as you behave based on that information, the more and more they will seek to exploit you. Because it's all about wasting your time, which they don't care about. And by the way, they make more money the more of your time they waste. Never forget that. It's a game. Okay, what else is there here? Okay, we're going to get into this. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. Once again, you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report, and we're talking about what the mainstream media and even the larger percentage of the alternative media is totally ignoring, or at the very least, it's substantially minimizing what is about to be, and this process has already begun. I'm talking about, of course, AI, artificial intelligence, replacing human jobs in America. Human jobs by the millions. That's right, by the millions in America alone. We're not even talking about globally, where it gets into hundreds of millions of people. So let's just start with America. In America alone, countless millions of jobs will be obsolete. They will not be hiring. They'll be shutting down because AI will replace human beings in many, many areas. And you know what? The experts don't even know for sure what areas will be impacted because we've never gone through a season, if you will, of a complete revamping of the economy. And remember, who owns the economy? This is, when you hear the baloney and the blowing of the smoke in your face and not even bother, I cannot stand to watch the local network affiliate channels like, 247, 5, and here, I'm talking about Los Angeles. These are the most, I'm trying to use more professional words here. The media, the local media, this is where most people get their news. Okay. The majority of Americans get their news from the hype and media control of local network media. So they may be owned by NBC, ABC, CBS, or some other gigantic media conglomerate that you may not know about, but they're the true owners and controllers of local media. And when you look at local media in the Southern California market, it is nothing less than an abomination. It's an abomination because it is the most biased, deliberately misdirecting people continually from the central truths that they need to know. So let's just take this particular issue. The media, the Great Reset people, the people that own these mega globalist corporations, they don't want the masses to know what's really going on because they know panic would ensue. So they try to keep people in a dumbed down, lethargic state, and they don't really examine or analyze or even report on this tidal wave of change that's now starting to emerge in our society. And once again, it's the tidal wave of millions of robotic technology, AI, artificial intelligence technology, machine technology, cybernetics, and then, of course, the more exotic stuff like clones, androids. So all of these things. And by the way, when I did research on this, which I've been doing for quite some time, the researchers, the experts contradict each other. So let me give you an example. They're generally saying that the high-end jobs that require, emotional empathy or people skills as well as knowledge are the jobs that are least likely to be affected by the AI revolution. But then you'll read another research report where it says that traditionally what they consider the more high-end jobs like lawyers, doctors, dentists, nurses with advanced nursing degrees, medical technology people, the people who use medical instruments to do things like X-ray and all the other technologies they have. And certain high-end engineering jobs, certain more high-end contracting jobs. These are the ones that are considered to be safer from you being replaced by AI. But then you'll read another research report, which will state that those jobs that I just mentioned to you are not safe at all. Because with the advances in AI, artificial intelligence, that AI can now do many of the things that were previously thought to be out of the range of AI. AI can now do it. So AI, as we said earlier in the program today, the Paul McGUIRE report, you already have local newspapers all over the United States that are not really written by local reporters. They could be written in a foreign nation, halfway or around the world. And like the Rose Bowl, I don't know the name of the publication, but the local publication that is published for all the people that live in the Rose Bowl, California, where they have the parade and stuff. That community has a local paper, and that local paper is not written by local human beings. It's written by AI. and AI goes into the computer systems, pulls out all the latest data, all the latest news and human interest stories that would interest the people in the Rose Bowl area of Pasadena, California. And then it publishes it. And most people think, oh, they're reading the local paper and they feel good. You know, they have that emotional feel good thing going on because you think you're getting local news from a local reporter and it gives you that homey feeling. Well, a huge percentage of all those local newspapers are published by AI in places like Taiwan and the Philippines and God knows where. So also, many jobs in the legal arena will be replaced by AI. And we're talking now, this is beginning now. This is not coming, 10 years from now. It's ramping up at high speed in the next 2 years. And I'm trying to give you this information, not to upset you, but to give you a heads up so you can acquire the knowledge and information that you need, which you're not going to get from other media outlets because they don't want to rock the boat, even if the boat's sinking. So you need to have information so you can be proactive and so you can survive, thrive, and do and be and not be a victim. That's an essential theme in this program, that if you're reading the Bible properly, God is teaching his people over and over and over again that he never created them to be victims, but to be victorious and overcomers. And I take that seriously, and so should you. Okay, let's look at this. Now, here's the irony of all this. So I'm doing research on the jobs and careers that will be available in the future that will hopefully not be impacted by AI. And I'm doing research on the jobs and careers that are the most vulnerable to an AI takeover. But here's the irony of the whole thing. And it just had a mini epiphany just a couple of minutes ago. I'm looking at my laptop computer, the screen, and I'm looking at what I'm researching. And then the obvious dawns on me. Not only am I using my laptop computer to get research information and articles and stuff, not only am I doing that, but what pops up in my prompt question, okay, which is what good paying, this is what I typed in. And I deliberately typed in a question mark because I knew the typing of a question mark at the end of my statement will initiate the Google AI response. So here's my question. What good paying jobs will be left when AI replaces humans? Question mark. And then boom, right dominating the first page and the second page, and it continues on for a while. The AI system of Google is giving me its artificial intelligent answer in a chatty, it's programmed to speak to you in kind of a chatty way, not to be confused with Chat GPT or whatever the heck it is. Okay, which we're on, by the way. Okay, so it says the AI engine or the artificial intelligence system of Google is saying this. While it's true that AI is rapidly advancing, it won't completely replace all jobs. Now, I'm a writer and a researcher and have been for like my entire life, even before I did it professionally. So I lock in. It's like there's an autopilot mechanism in my brain, my subconscious, my entire being. And so when I glance at a page and read it, I can absorb and analyze and pick up a vast amount of information that the ordinary, let's say, this is kind of awkward, but the ordinary non-professional reader and writer would not be able to pick up. So the first thing that I pick up, and it hits me like a sledgehammer. It's not a neutral thing. It's like I'm operating in a zone of enhanced perception. And by the way, one of the sub-themes of this show is I've been trying to educate the listeners of the Paul McGUIRE Report for years on how to increase their intelligence, increase their knowledge, how to increase their perception, which I call enhanced perception, because these are not just things you're born with. You can actively develop and expand those things. And God told me a long time ago, if I've given you knowledge and wisdom in certain areas, my expectation from you, Paul, is that you're going to pass it on to my people. So that's what I'm all about. Okay. So again, I'm reading this is not being written by a staff of human beings, of men and women who are writers, reporters, researchers, analysts, or whatever. This is entirely being written by a computer. Okay. No human being is writing this. This is the Google computer writing to me. So notice, I'm just going to read the first sentence again. And notice I'm trying to read the sentences. I'm trying to do it in such a way that I'm amplifying a little bit. I'm trying to amplify the intended emotional tone of the AI system that is writing this article. So I'm mimicking, if you will, I'm imitating the emotional, psychological tone that this is being written in, because that's, I believe, more effective than if I was to underline it with a pen, because nobody's following this by writing in a pen. It's a way of focusing in on the intentional, well, let's call it for what it is. It's a way of focusing in on the intentional psyop strategy that is going on in the writing. So let me read it to you again. While it's true that AI is rapidly advancing, it won't completely replace all jobs. Now, that tone in my voice was semi-robotic, and noticed how it was positive, it was upbeat, it was empathetic, and it was reassuring. So this is what we're talking about when I hammer home over and over again, knowledge is power and stuff. So opening sentence, while it's true, because they know the reader, that's you and me, is already predisposed to be suspicious of Google and AI, because AI and Google are AI, for crying out loud. They're big tech. So they start with kind of a disarming statement. While it's true, that's to get you to drop your defenses. Okay, that's to get you to jettison your suspicions. While it's true that AI is rapidly advancing, so they're acknowledging the AI revolution, but they're rebranding it in a very soft, reassuring tone of voice. While it's true that AI is rapidly advancing, it won't completely replace all jobs. And that's the key phrase they want you to have you embed that in your consciousness. They do not want you freaking out. They want you to know that AI is going to cause significant upheaval in our society, but it won't completely replace all jobs. So that's the reassuring statement, because they don't want, especially a big tech company, they don't want people throwing rocks at it, okay? It won't completely replace all jobs, especially those requiring human qualities like empathy, creativity, and complex problem solving. High-paying jobs that are likely to remain include those in healthcare, doctors and nurses, education, teachers, professors, creative fields, artists, musicians, and certain skilled trades. Additionally, careers focused on AI development and management, like robotics engineers and AI researchers, are expected to grow. So they're trying to say massive changes are coming, but there are going to be good jobs available in these fields. Now, being that I make my living communicating to people from a biblical worldview, but I integrate a biblical worldview with science, economics, technology, and all the other things that I dive into, because I have felt from the early days when I first accepted Christ into my life, when I would look at the Christian culture, I was very much bothered by the aberrant nature of the Christian culture, because my salvation was legitimate. I was raised in an atheistic, humanistic home, but I had an expectation, and I believe I should have that expectation, that those people that are claiming to be children of God, those people that are claiming to be born again, should be significantly more intelligent, more knowledgeable, more responsible, more victorious, more on top of it, more on the cutting edge than the general population. Because if you're claiming the big claim that you know the God of the universe, there better be some evidence in your life, or people have every right to be suspicious of your claims. So I look at the Christian culture back then, this was 40 years ago, I look at it today, and it is, as a friend of mine, Frankie Schaeffer, the son of the great Dr. Francis Schaeffer, the most influential Christian theologian and philosopher in the last 75 years. And his father had an enormous impact on my life. Frankie, I don't know what Frankie is doing right now in terms of his theology and philosophy. I know something about it, but I don't think I would. I think I would agree with him in many areas, but I think there are certain areas that I definitely would not agree with him about. In any case, he and his father said a lot of very truthful things. And I think it was Frankie Schaeffer that wrote the book Addicted to Mediocrity, where he was talking about the Christian culture from the perspective of his father and himself. And he observed, rightly so, that the Christian culture seemed to be addicted, like a heroin or a meth addict, addicted to mediocrity. And what do we mean by that? Addicted to being dumbed down, not thinking, out of it. You know, it sounds like a put down, and I don't mean it as a put down, but I think, honestly, I'm speaking the truth, and hopefully in love, because I am a Christian, and I believe in the Bible. That doesn't change for me. But the Christian culture, and this is why I believe God has always communicated to me, when he does communicate to me in terms of a prophetic vision or a prophetic dream, God will often communicate to me in those supernatural events that he wants his people to repent. To repent of what? Well, among other things, being addicted to mediocrity, because that you're not going to fulfill the Great Commission when you're mediocre. Okay, again, I didn't mean it as a put down. It's like, think of a coach that has to confront his team so they can win the Super Bowl. Okay, so now on the other hand, Google, the AI machines, the big tech companies, the globalist corporations, they have a hidden agenda. And you already know what that hidden agenda is. I already know what the hidden agenda is. The bottom line is the bottom line. They want to make as much money as possible. And we all know, if we've had any training in business or economics, that the single most important factor for any particular company in generating a profit is there are a lot of things that a business or a corporation cannot control in terms of the cost of their product or service. You know, the cost of whatever materials they're going to make, lithium batteries out of for computers and cars or whatever. Certain costs are what they are, and you can't get them lower, at least at this particular time. So in the business world, the age-old axiom is the only cost to a corporation or a business that can be controlled by the corporation and business is the cost of hiring employees, the cost of paying salaries or commissions. The biggest cost for any company is its employment, job-related costs. That's the one area where you can manipulate things. And when I say manipulate things, the dirty, nasty truth is, and you know what I'm going to say already, is that the main way they can control costs is by shrinking people's salaries, shrinking people's incomes, firing people, reducing staff, letting go of staff, and now automating. And automating has been going on for a long time, but now it's going through the roof. So AI, don't fool yourself that, they can charm you all. The AI article can charm you all it wants. Like, it won't completely replace all jobs. Well, you just let a monster inside of the house. Okay, just imagine you've locked the doors on your house. Imagine it's a 2-story house in a suburban neighborhood. You've turned on all the alarms. You think you're safe and secure. The next thing you know, you hear some banging at the doors and the windows. The next thing you know, something smashes down the front door, and the lights are low. It's because it's night, and all you can make out, it looks like somebody's dressed up in like a Frankenstein outfit for Halloween, or wearing some kind of monster outfit for Halloween. And so in this parable that I'm making up as I'm talking to you, a monster For all practical purposes, the only thing you can figure out is that a monster has broken down the front door of your house, and there is a monster on a rampage in your house. And that monster's out to destroy you. Now, that's my made-up instant coffee microwave mix of a parable, Paul McGUIRE mini parable. And so that's what AI is. AI is the initial phases, of the beast system, 666, wireless currency. The Great Reset has rebranded itself. The Great Reset used to use the term the New World Order, which means one world government, one world religion, one world economic system. And the Great Reset is a rebranding of that term, but those three areas of power, global government, global religion, and global economic system, are going to be in place, but they're going to be wireless and ultimately controlled by and run by AI. So the beast system and the 666 financial system and the nanochip implants that have already been implanted create a global electrical grid that the Bible refers to as the beast system, headed up by the false prophet and the Antichrist. It's the beast system. So it's not so far-fetched when I make up a parable and say there's a monster in your house and the monster is running a rampage in your house. It's not so far-fetched, is it, when you think of what the Bible literally says and the kind of symbolic parable I threw together. Okay, so here it says it won't completely replace all jobs. But here's where the lies come in. And this is what I want to focus in on. Every communication that you've ever received in your life from these giant institutions, and you know what I'm talking about, they have always lied to you, and they've always lied to me consistently, year after year, decade after decade. They lie, lie, lie. And they lie. You don't think that AI isn't lying to you with this soft-pedaled article on jobs in the future and the threat from AI? Look, for crying out loud, the article is written by AI. Now, they say, well, AI is not, it's still in a very primitive state. It's essentially a glorified robot. AI is nothing to be worried about because AI doesn't have consciousness. AI is not self-aware, and the fancy term for that is sentient. AI is not yet sentient or self-aware. So it couldn't, as such, they say with great confidence, as such, it couldn't organize or conspire to initiate a takeover plot to mankind, and it wouldn't deliberately create AI answers about the future of our jobs and our civilization. AI couldn't possibly have malicious intent or be involved in some kind of organized effort to take down the human race and enslave the human race. No, that's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. Is it crazy talk? Let me ask you a question. How do you know, how do I know that AI has not already become sentient? How do you know, how do I know that AI has not already become self-aware? How do we know that AI is not already has its own consciousness and its own awareness? How do we know that AI hasn't crossed that metaphysical barrier, if you will, and become conscious, sentient, self-aware, having consciousness? You don't know. You have to take their word for it. Now, I've been talking about for a long time the reality of directed energy weapons, and the head of the CIA, I have it in my book, the entire quotes. The former head of the CIA, spoke before the Council on Foreign Relations about the global usage of weather modification technology, which he called geoengineering. So he openly admitted that geoengineering has been going on for many decades. So for all those fools that mock you and laugh at you and try to dismiss you for telling them the facts about why there is weird weather, if they bothered to do any research at all, they would find out that it's a stone cold fact that the former head of the CIA admitted to. He just called it geoengineering. and weather modification technology that has been going on all around the world. And he said that the primary goal of this is to protect mankind from freak weather like the Earth getting too hot from the sun, or the world getting too cold from a lack of sunlight. That the purpose of geoengineering was to modify and protect our weather systems, our global weather systems. So that has been going on, and now there's a big lawsuit being initiated by somebody high up in the Trump department. They're initiating a major lawsuit against weather modification technology. They want to expose it. They want to expose who's behind it. They want to force them to pay all the potential medical damages that are connected to weather modification technology. So, the parade of the emperor who's naked and the kid that shouts, "The emperor has no clothes," that day has arrived. And so you can be on the side of stupidity. Being on the side of stupidity buys you short-term approval from your so-called friends and associates. Being on the side of stupidity buys you a short reprieve where you get a kind of counterfeit respect because you're going along with the thinking of the group mind or the world brain or whatever you want to call it. But the fact of the matter is, communication right now, due to the various social media and other things, is accelerating so fast that more and more people are becoming aware of what's really going on. So if you're marrying yourself to a position and a belief about something because you think it's going to buy you social acceptance, you're in for a rude awakening, because at the rate everything is moving, at the rate of the flow of information, it'll just be 2 years before it'll be common knowledge that weather modification technology has existed. And you could have been known as the intelligent one. I get the benefits. I get the huge heat. I get the attacks and the name calling big time because I'm 40 years to 50 years ahead of the game. I've been talking about a lot of this stuff for 40 years, for crying out loud. You better believe I take heat for what I say, always, from every angle. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist and blah, blah, blah. And I don't give a hoot. I don't give a hoot. It means nothing to me. You understand that? It means nothing to me. And what inevitably happens as the years go by, all of a sudden, the very things that I was preaching about and communicating to millions of people year after year, suddenly they become substantiated. Suddenly evidence comes forth. Suddenly there's a shift in the wind, and people understand that they were bamboozled, and the stuff that McGUIRE was saying, guess what? It was always true. He knew what he was talking about. I have people who listen to this show and my previous show, the Paul McGUIRE Show and the Paul McGUIRE Report. So these programs have been on for like 25 years by now, okay, or something like that. About 25 years. And they get in little sparring conversations with their family, their friends, their neighbors. When their neighbors finally see the light and say, that freak weather, that was done by weather modification technology. The long-term listeners of the Paul McGUIRE Report and my other program fire back at their friends little quip statements like, "Oh, you just recently woke up to that fact? We've known about that for 30 years. We listened to a program called the Paul McGUIRE Show or the Paul McGUIRE Report. And McGUIRE has been talking about weather modification and directed energy weapons for 20 and 30 years. Where have you been?" You see, they're able to take a superior position. And so this is not about ego and pride. This is about winning a cultural, spiritual war. And if you can't put forth your truth or the real truth in scientific, technological, factual terms, you're going to lose the battle. If people don't respect you, they're not going to listen to you. And they will respect you if you're going to sources of information that are credible. This program is a credible source of information because I don't just accept anything. It has to go through analysis and all kinds of things. Okay, so I wouldn't trust. Is AI conscious? I don't know. But I do know that all these high-tech weapons and technologies and sciences I've been talking about for decades were operating back in 1941, for crying out loud. So just because they're pretending, now, what do I think personally? Off the record? Yes, and it's off the record and it's personally, and I'm not saying it emphatically. I'm saying that I don't think, I'm not saying I don't know, I don't think that at this time period, at this moment, AI is sentient, AI is self-aware, or AI has developed consciousness. Now, let me pause on that. However, even though I don't think that AI has achieved that result, it is very possible that AI is closing in on becoming sentient, becoming self-aware, and developing consciousness. And that could happen very soon. And when I say very soon, I mean like very soon. So I'm hesitant to say that it's already happened, only because I haven't come across anything that would suggest that it is. But that doesn't mean it hasn't been done secretly. I think, though, based on just the information that's coming out, there's a strong probability that, at the very least, AI, artificial intelligence, is closing in very fast on becoming sentient, self-aware, and developing its own consciousness. And then finally, AI is going to cause a revolution around the world of job displacement. Now, it is also possible that if AI, see, there's all these intermediate stages that the media and the so-called AI experts never talk about publicly. But if you were to analyze it just using your own mind, it's not always a yes or no proposition. There's all kinds of medium stages. It's possible that AI, for example, has developed a kind of hybrid consciousness, in that it has learned to, with the help of men, scientists, etc., AI has learned to blend its thinking processes, its intelligence, its reasoning, its logic. It's learned to blend it and self-modify it into like a hybrid entity that is not yet totally sentient, self-aware, and has consciousness, but because it's working with man, it's developing a hybrid kind of form of consciousness, especially as it's already a reality that we have wireless computer to brain interfaces. That's been going on for decades. It's already a reality that we can have computer to computer interfaces. And it's already a reality that digital telepathy and things like that are in various phases of development. So it is possible that there is a cabal, if you will, of dark scientists that are using AI, kind of like Dr. Frankenstein used the monster Frankenstein to accomplish his will. They're using AI to be their monster to take over the world. So in that sense, it wouldn't be something that was purely driven by AI, but it could be something that's driven by a hybrid entity created by AI, integrating itself with man's intelligence, man's consciousness, and man's human aspects and attributes. So we don't know the whole story of how far this is developed. That's the point. And don't assume that what you're reading is truthful. There's a lot of things going on in this world, especially within the military-industrial complex and science and all kinds of things, that they are so far advanced that the average person has no idea whatsoever about how very advanced we have now become scientifically and technologically, especially in areas like consciousness and artificial intelligence, etc. Okay, you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm Paul McGUIRE. We'll be back in a moment, and we're going to give you an overview of what AI projects are the safer careers and what AI projects are the unsafe careers. Visit paulmcguire.us. Remember, we do what we can do in terms of reaching people we have a goal. And when you go and ask the Lord, this is something AI can't do. AI can't ask the Lord because it's not human. God is not going to have conversations with AI. God may direct and control and overrule AI, but God has said in his word that his crowning creation of all the creatures he's created, mankind is the crowning creation of God. And never forget that. In the image of God, he made them. Who's he? God. God made them both male and female. In the image of God, in the likeness of God, in the coding, you will, of God, God made them both male and female. And that's powerful. That is so far beyond AI, it makes your head spin. Okay, this is the Paul McGUIRE Report. We'll be back in just a moment. Visit paulmcguire.us. You are listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. Okay. Again, the irony, I'm reading Google's AI to give me an analysis, for crying out loud, on what the future will be like with the advances of AI. Okay, so this is, remember, AI, the AI engines, the AI entities, whatever you want to call them, that are out there, and there are thousands of them out there right now. Don't think for one moment that you're getting an objective, nonpartisan, impartial perspective. You're not. These AI machines have been programmed by software developers to be biased, to be politically correct, to be pro-globalist, pro-Great Reset. They're biased. They're programmed to be biased. Just because they're logical computer machines doesn't mean they're not giving you information that has been deliberately warped and shaped to fit into the politically correct agenda, because that's the main purpose of it. So you're not really getting the truth. You're getting a filtered truth. So here's what AI, the Google AI, says. Jobs likely to remain. Doctors, nurses, therapists, counselors. Those are supposed to be safe jobs. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. I would say it's not as rosy as you think. I think that's probably generally true. But I can tell you right now, there's a huge percent. It's happening right now, for crying out loud. A huge percentage of these jobs that I just read to you are being done by professionals over the internet using technologies like Zoom and other things. There are doctors who there's a huge percentage of doctors in all kinds of doctors' clinics that have their interviews with their patients and stuff over video, or over Zoom and the other stuff. That people are, less and less are people driving to some location to have a doctor's appointment. It's done by video. Education, it's not going to be as rosy as the Google AI is saying. The Google AI is saying that teachers, professors, and other educators will be needed to guide and support students, particularly in areas requiring nuanced understanding and personalized attention. That is BS. So AI is telling you that it's going to be happy days for people in the education profession. That is BS. It screams BS. You know why? Because if you're educated and you're already analytical, you have the intellectual firepower to examine statements like this, and instantaneously you can determine that this is a bunch of you-know-what and you're being lied to. But if you've been a dumbed-down clown, you're going to be sucker punched till you turn black and blue. Okay, so they're saying teachers, professors, and other educators will still be needed to guide and support students, particularly in areas requiring nuanced understanding and personalized attention. I'm a writer, okay? I make a living as a writer. Press releases in my early days, and 37 books, for crying out loud. This is smoke. This is blowing smoke in your face from the beginning of this paragraph to the end. It's one blast of cigar smoke in your face. When they say education, these jobs are going to be protected because we need educators, teachers, and professors to guide and support students. That's a general statement that actually doesn't mean anything, particularly in areas requiring nuanced understanding and personalized attention. Again, that statement means absolutely nothing. It's just using flowery words like nuanced, which means the ability to detect or perceive subtle differences and understanding, nuanced understanding. AI can develop nuanced understanding through literary means. I believe it can already produce nuanced understanding and nuanced communications at a far higher level than human beings already now. Okay. And personalized attention, I can talk to AI 24/7. The other thing is, look at, no pun intended, look at the core of the global educational system. It's one, right now, we're all under the umbrella of a global educational system that has a central core to it. The global educational system was developed by Julian Huxley, the father and founder of Common Core education, the founder of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational Division for Global Education. And Julian Huxley was the father of transhumanism, and Julian Huxley was the brother of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. You get the connections? Yes, you do. Okay, so the Common Core curriculum that Huxley developed for a world education system run by the UN, which is already in place, by the way. Most schools use Common Core. Common Core, let me simplify. Whenever your student is being taught under the Common Core system, which was developed by the United Nations and Julian Huxley, Common Core simply means this. The teachers kind of preach or speak the party line to the students, okay? To the degree that the students repeat word for word whatever the teacher is saying to them and whatever the books that they're supposed to read are saying to them, to the degree that the students simply regurgitate and simply repeat word for word whatever was told to them, that is how they get higher and higher grades. So you can sucker punch the parents into thinking, oh, Common Core is excellent because Common Core, my child is now getting huge improvements in his reading and his writing and his arithmetic since they went to Common Core. Yeah, because the bozo parent doesn't understand that Common Core gives you a higher grade, not if you understand what you've been taught, not if you know how to think about what you've been taught, not if you are analyzing what you've been taught. Common Core will make sure you will get higher grades to the degree that you, in an unthinking manner, simply repeat word for word like a robot whatever was said to you by the teacher or whatever was written in the books, to the degree that the student simply repeats word for word what was said to them. That's how they get high degrees. They don't get high degrees or grades because they understand it, because they can do anything intelligent with it. It's just a robotic parroting of what they were spoon-fed. And so it's false. It's an indoctrination program designed to dumb down the student so the student will fit into a mediocre job, like maybe, delivering pizza in the future and be happy about it. That's what it's all about. You say, well, I don't believe that. The only reason you don't believe that is because you don't know what you're talking about. When the day comes that you decide to know what you're talking about and actually read, think, and study for yourself, then, and only then, have you earned a right to have a place at the table and enter into an intelligent discussion of the matter. Until then, humble yourself privately and learn and read and be open to the possibility that you may not know it all. Okay, so you're telling me, AI is telling me that that healthcare and education and these things, especially education, safe jobs. No, not safe jobs. Because the need for qualified teachers is going to shrink into a lesser and lesser demand, because if all you're doing is Common Core style education, that could better be done by a robot or an artificial intelligence machine, which spits out information and then will reward the student if the student robotically repeats the information. Now here, creative fields. Yeah, okay. Artists, musicians, writers, designers will continue to be in demand, and, there'll be good jobs in that field. Yes, there will be good jobs in those fields, but creative fields are highly desirable. Everybody and their brother wants to be a movie star, a film director, or something they can do in the entertainment industry. Everybody wants to get in on that creative and very rewarding area of jobs. So the problem is that since so many people want to be in the creative fields, percentage-wise, there are not that many jobs available. Okay, look, I came to Hollywood to be in the feature film business, but I was in the feature film business before I got to Hollywood. I had already produced a feature film with theatrical distribution. I had already promoted in mainstream feature films, mainstream theaters. I had already promoted a whole bunch of feature films. So when I came to Hollywood, I wasn't trying to break into a business that I didn't have a resume for. I had a resume for it already. But even with that resume, penetrating the Hollywood feature film, music industry, that whole thing is very tough to do. So every year, there are, I don't know how many, tens of thousands, 100,000 people each year. I don't know. It's a minimum in the tens of thousands, especially of women, attractive women who want to be actresses, who flock to Hollywood every year to pursue their dream, or singers, or writers in all the creative fields. They come to Hollywood to pursue their dream. And the vast majority of them, they may work in a couple of jobs here and there professionally, but the vast majority of them have to end up working in lower paid, far less desirable jobs. They have to, quote, keep their day jobs, and you know what I mean, while they're trying to make it in the business. And so they have to do, crummy jobs until that time comes. And many of them, a certain amount of years pass by, and they bail. They're nowhere to be found. They left. They got out of it while they still could. So this is a very dishonest report from the AI system at Google, because they're not telling you the real truth. Okay, so we could go in further area. Now, here it's saying, I do want to read you this. This is from the Google AI artificial intelligence entity. And let me read it to you. Skilled trades jobs that are likely to remain in demand despite AI advancements include those requiring hands-on skills, problem solving, and human interaction, such as electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, and carpenters. Additionally, roles involving complex decision-making, creativity, and specialized knowledge like surgeons and chefs are also expected to be less susceptible to automation. But you see, if you read this carefully, I grew up in a generation where everybody was taught that if you got a college degree, you wouldn't have to be a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter or whatever. And so everybody that could got a college degree because we were told that was your ticket to a better income, better employment. Well, guess what happened as the decades went by? The available jobs in the higher end sectors, the more glamorous jobs, they became less and less available. And the joke soon became, as the decades went by, that the guys who didn't go to college, the guys who were willing to do the less glamorous work of being electricians and plumbers and technicians and carpenters, all those guys that were willing to get their hands dirty and crawl under a house and stuff, they were starting to make big bucks, and they weren't getting afraid of getting fired because there was always a need. There's always a need for electricians and plumbers and carpenters and stuff. And so the rude awakening was that all the people in the so-called, they were looked down upon as being lower class jobs. But the truth of the matter is, as time went on, economically, they were making more money. The electricians, the plumbers, the technicians, and the carpenters today and in the decades past are making, on average, a lot more money than the people with the fancy jobs and the fancy titles who are often unemployed. So, we were told lies. And I'm telling you right now, as you look at this research on AI impacting the job market, you have to discern the difference between the baloney you're being fed and the lies and what the real truth is. Let me give you another example. I remember at a certain even when I was in college, the college industry and university industry was promoting the idea that computers was the career of the future. Software programmers, computer technicians, computers was the wave of the future. Now, back then, when I was in college, this was before cell phones and the internet and all the things that a lot of you guys and girls take for granted. This was before all that. But people were bravely getting their degrees in computer science and other computer fields because that was the mantra, baby. Computers are the wave of the future. So guess what happens? The decades go by, and lots of people start to get hired by big tech and the computer corporations, and they are making big money, and some are still making big money. And so it's a bonanza. People are making money like crazy in the computer industry. It's like the California gold rush all over again. But as time goes on, the heads, and I'm not going to mention their names, you know their names. Their names are household names, every one of them. The heads of like Microsoft and Apple, and you can go down the list, and Google and all the rest, all the big tech computer companies, all the Silicon Valley jobs. But guess what? I don't know about all, but a lot of the heads of those companies use their power and influence in Washington, D.C. I think it was called the H-1B1 visas. I don't know if I have the name right, but they created these special visas which allowed the big tech companies to bring in all the computer scientists, all the software programmers, all the computer technicians, especially from places like India, because India, they're just, for some reason, they're very good and computer savvy. And so the big tech companies with the names, the heads of the big tech companies that have household names, if I name their names, you'd know them in a second. They created this special visa to bring in legally all these computer experts from India. But then when they hired all the huge numbers of computer experts from India, but when they hired them, they paid them significantly less money. They paid them with significantly less benefits than they paid their American college graduates. All the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who got their degrees in computers and computer science, who were American and went to American colleges and universities. Suddenly, mysteriously, they discovered they couldn't get jobs. And then they discovered, not so mysteriously, that the reason they couldn't get jobs is because all these big tech companies were hiring computer experts and computer scientists from nations like India and paying them far less money and giving them far less benefits than the American computer people would have gotten. And so there was a tremendous amount of anger out there, but you'd never hear about it because the media smothered it up, covered it up. And now today, it is very hard to get a job in the computer industry. So once again, people being lied to, and their lives were hurt because they were lied to. So because in order to make money, the computer companies wanted to hire the cheaper employees from India who were very good at what they did, but they could get them far cheaper. And that's happening up to the minute today. So you can't allow yourself to be manipulated. Now, back to this AI impact on things of the future. This revolution driven by AI and computers is going to affect everybody, because even if it doesn't affect you directly and individually, people in your neighborhood, your neighbors, people that your kids go to school with, you see, they're going to come from different industries, different job sectors. And yes, not every job sector is going to be negatively impacted by AI. But there's a significant percentage of many different diverse job sectors that will be negatively impacted by AI. And then you'll have a cascade effect. Because then economic problems, maybe bankruptcies, maybe not being able to pay your mortgage, people, bailing on their houses because they can't make their mortgage payments or loan payments, and it sends a shockwave out throughout the entire society, and then you're in the middle of a full-blown economic crisis. Who doesn't get impacted by the crisis? The globalist elite, the people that are on the top of the pyramid of everything we've been talking about. The people who are behind AI are the globalist elite. And That's why they want to create a great reset. Since they control all the mainstream media, they're controlling the flow of information into your mind, your children's minds, and your neighbors' minds. And so they're concealing from you the dirty, cold truth about what's really about to happen in America. They're not telling you. I'm telling you. And I'm telling you, you're not doomed. I'm telling you, there's a way out of the situation. If you know God, and if you're walking with God, and you're communicating with God, and you're actually doing what God says, God will help you meet your needs. He will direct you and guide you. That's part of your inheritance as a child of God. But the globalist elite, they've created the Great Reset. Why do you think they created the Great Reset? Because these people worship the god of money. And they know there are going to be billions of people on planet Earth who are going to lose their jobs in this AI revolution. And countless millions in America alone are going to lose their jobs due to an AI revolution. They know that. They've known that for 150 years, for crying out loud. Yes. Yes. And they also know that the middle class and working class, they know the middle class, which was the hallmark, the existence of the middle class was the pinnacle of the American dream. But as America has gravitated to socialism, Marxism, and communism, and succumbed to the indoctrination from the globalist elite, America has drifted farther and farther away from God and become humanistic in almost every way. Now that America has embraced humanism, it makes it spiritually vulnerable to the collapse of the middle class and to the deterioration of what was known as the American dream. You should be paying close attention. You should be riveted. Not because I'm phenomenal. You should be riveted because the truth I'm telling you can set you free if you get a hold of it. So this thing is going to come in like a tsunami, and nobody knows it yet because they haven't conceptualized it. Symbolically, it's going to look like when Louisiana was hit by those massive floods, because the I forgot what you call those barriers they build to keep the ocean and floodwaters from coming in. And so massive amounts of water flooded the streets of Louisiana. And you saw it, the floods are like 4 feet high. And some people are driving boats on the floodwaters and cars have submerged, and it's a nightmare. Well, that's what it's going to be. That's a visual symbol of what it's going to be like when AI comes in like a tsunami. You've been warned, and if you're proactive, there are things that you can do. I'm trying to weave them into the content of the show. There are things you can do to overcome and not be taken down by this. So the globalist elite, the Great Reset people, are deliberately lowering the income. They're turning they've said this in their writing, for crying out loud. I've read hundreds of books on this topic alone. This is not something I'm making up, some fairy tale I picked up along the way. This is stuff they've come out and said publicly for decade after decade after decade. In 1918, when the League of Nations was founded, and that was the world's first trial run for the United Nations, they planned to create a one world communist, one world socialist system with a one world government where it will run by communist principles. Everybody would be equally poor or equally wealthy. Now, we're going to come back in just a moment and give you the truth that should blow the doors open into freedom. I need you to stay with me and ride with this. Just because it's tough doesn't mean you can comprehend it. You can comprehend it, and you can assimilate it into your mind, and you can be a force to contend with. This is Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us.